In this section of Chapter 8, we are going to discuss ways of showing that you have a parallelogram. There are 5 ways to show that you have a parallelogram. The first way of showing that is the definition of parallelogram, which means that you have 2 sets of parallel sides. See how we have one set with 1 marking of parallel and the other set with 2 markings of parallel. If you were having to do this given points, what you would have to do would be to use the slope formula 4 times. Because you'd have to do the slope of one set, that's 2 slope formulas, and then the slope of the other set. And so that means that you would do the slope of all 4 sides. And then make sure that your slopes are the same. If they're the same, then they are parallel. So that's one way of showing that you have a parallelogram. Another way of showing that you have a parallelogram is that you have 2 sets of opposite sides that are congruent. See how they have these tick marks on the left and right with 1 and then the top and bottom with 2. If you're going to do that, you would need to either be able to count if it's a graph, if it goes horizontal or vertical, you could count the distance. Otherwise, you might need to do the distance formula. And you might have to do that 4 times. Depending on how your graph looks, that would be one option of, showing that it's a parallelogram. The third method is to show that you have both pairs of opposite angles congruent. Now we're going to use problems where we are using this, but it doesn't work out very well if I give you 4 points and ask you to plot them and then tell me if it's a parallelogram or not. This would be the hardest way, and you could only do it if these were right angles. So I'm not going to write any formulas here. We will use this, but mostly just if they say, what value of x makes this a parallelogram? And then you pretend it's a parallelogram and you solve like you did in the previous section. The fourth method is to show that one set of opposite sides are congruent and parallel. And if you're going to do that given some coordinates, what you would do is you would do the slope formula 2 times, 1 for each side to tell that the slopes are the same, and then you would also do the distance formula 2 times. Now, what they always do to try to trick you is they'll try to say that, one set of opposite sides is parallel, and then they'll tell you the other set is congruent, and that is not one of these 5 ways, so please don't fall for that if they try to do that. If they're like, is this a parallelogram? Always, sometimes, or never, and they draw you that picture, don't fall for that. Don't put, always. That's not one of these 5 methods. And then the last of the methods, this is my favorite because it's the quickest way, and it uses my favorite formula. If you want to show that the diagonals bisect each other, then the midpoint of one diagonal would be the same point as the midpoint of the other. So to do this, you would just do the midpoint formula 2 times. You would do the midpoint of one diagonal and the midpoint of the other diagonal, and then that would be all you would need to do. So these are the 5 ways of showing that you have a parallelogram, and we're going to use them for an activity in class where we are proving that we have a parallelogram or possibly that we don't have a parallelogram. We're going to have to pick one of these 5 methods to use, whichever one you want to use, and you show your work, and you're going to make your own video with your problem and to show that you have a parallelogram or not.